Nashville Public Radio serves Middle Tennessee in many ways every day, including through this podcast. You can support it by leaving a review or rating, by telling a friend about it, or by contributing at WPLN.org/give.
This is the Nash Villager Podcast. It's November 13th, 2025, and on this day in 1927, New York's Holland Tunnel opened to traffic, which makes this one of those landmark dates in transportation history. The Holland Tunnel runs just over a mile and a half, connecting Manhattan to New Jersey with a road that passes under the Hudson River. Building it was a feat of cooperation between two states, but it was also just a flat-out feat of engineering. Its designers had to figure out things like how to keep it from filling with water during construction, and then, once it was open, how to ventilate the tunnel well enough that it didn't become dangerously full of automobile fumes. Today, about 1 million vehicles pass through the tunnel each month, and along with several other tunnels and bridges that handle a similar amount of traffic, it's an integral way for commuters from the greater New York area to access the city. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with historical context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. Here in Nashville, we're definitely in a season of leveling up our transportation options, one way or the other. The airport is continuing a substantial expansion. There are still rumblings that Amtrak might expand to include a line through this city. The transit referendum that passed last year opened the door to making big improvements to the WeGo bus system, along with making the city a safer place to walk or ride a bike. And the Boring Company is making a tunnel. The Nashville Loop, as Elon Musk's firm is calling its tunnel, is supposed to be built much more quickly than the Holland Tunnel was back in the day. It took 7 years to complete the 1.5 miles under the Hudson. The Nashville Loop will run about 10 miles under downtown and Murfreesboro Pike, with an estimated opening date for at least part of it by the end of next year. Now, part of that difference in speed is just that it's been a full century since the Holland Tunnel was built. Equipment's better, with stronger engines, plus all the lessons learned in New York and so many other places where tunnels have been built can inform what the Boring Company does now. Still, it's really fast when you compare the plans for the Nashville Loop to some more recent projects as well. And those comparisons also give a little bit of perspective about how the tunnel here is supposed to compare to what there is in other places when it comes to size and sophistication of design. So, for instance, there's the longest tunnel in the world, completed just under a decade ago. It's called the Gotthard Base Tunnel, and it carries train tracks through a mountain in Switzerland. And in one way, this is the kind of design most comparable to the Nashville Loop because it's not a tunnel that just anyone can drive through, and because both are designed to be a pair of parallel shafts with just enough room for a single lane of one-way traffic. Now, the Swiss tunnel is for trains. The Nashville one will be for Teslas operated by professional drivers. The one in Switzerland is about 3.5 times longer than the Nashville Loop. And much like what's being planned here, it was primarily dug out with the use of a massive boring machine instead of blasting. But it took a lot longer per mile than what's being projected here. The Gotthard Base Tunnel was under construction for 17 years. Nearly 2 decades. In that time, 9 workers died. But in the end, the results are pretty impressive. Rather than having to slowly climb up and then wind around through alpine passes, trains are able to speed through the tunnel at about 60 miles per hour. And between freight and passenger traffic, roughly 4 trains an hour run through the tunnel, 2 in each direction. That's a lot of cargo and a lot of people. The longest tunnel that carries vehicle traffic is in Norway. Evidently, that nation is just full of tunnels. They've turned out to be a very important means of creating access to communities that would otherwise be largely cut off from the rest of the world by mountains and fjords. And that record-setting tunnel, the Linebaugh Tunnel, is the linchpin to making it feasible to drive between the cities of Bergen and Oslo without taking a ferry. Now, that tunnel is just over 15 miles long. And right away, that, along with learning how much shorter something like the Holland Tunnel is, makes me realize just how long the one being built here is, relatively speaking. I mean, ours will be equal to about 2/3 of the world's longest tunnel meant for cars. The Norwegian tunnel is also considered to be one of the safest in the world. There's a state-of-the-art ventilation system, of course. Safety stations at a number of spots along the road have emergency equipment along with call boxes. There are a number of spots where a car can be pulled to the side and parked if need be. And the designers included a few man-made caves where the tunnel gets large enough for vehicles to turn around and go back out of the way they came in. Now, it carries a road that anyone can drive on, so some of those measures are mostly used by folks who are finding that driving in a tunnel is more challenging than they thought it would be, perhaps more claustrophobic than they can handle. But in the event of some kind of cave-in or even just someone having car trouble, those spots for pulling off or turning around make it possible to get people out easily or to keep traffic from getting too backed up. The Linebaugh tunnel took about 5 years to build using a combination of several techniques. And since it opened in 2000, officials say an average of about 1,000 cars a day have passed through. It's really hard to know what to expect in terms of the traffic capacity for the Nashville Loop. You and I won't be able to just drive our cars in there. No, not even if your car is a Tesla. The Boring Company plans to have its own fleet of cars with professional drivers that will basically offer taxi or Uber-style rides between the airport and downtown for a fee. So how many people use the tunnel will depend not only on demand, but on how many cars they have in operation and how many drivers they hire. The company's website says they haven't figured out how many stations there will be along the way for people to get in or out of the tunnel, but at least some of them will double as charging stations for their cars. Some of those will hold just 4 vehicles. Others could be home base for up to 20. It all just depends. Now, if one of those cars breaks down mid-route or something else makes it impossible to pass through the tunnel, the materials shared so far from the company make it clear that there will be enough room for people to open the doors of their vehicle and exit on foot. But it doesn't sound like there's a way to turn the cars around and go back to the previous station without, I guess, just carefully driving in reverse. That said, the company does say it has a couple of layers of monitoring built into the design. Cameras in the tunnel itself, GPS on the cars. So officials will be able to know right away if something goes wrong. And there's a plan for making sure troublemakers don't enter the tunnel and for keeping riders safe if they do somehow break in. So far, there's been digging at the initial access point, which is in a state-owned parking lot on the north side of downtown. The Boring Company has reportedly purchased a small piece of land right off Murfreesboro Road, around where the tunnel will likely make its turn towards the airport. It seems as though there's been some exploratory digging in the Vanderbilt area, too, which could suggest a future spur route. All of this before the completion of an environmental review, which the company says is underway. While there's no real estimate for how much traffic will ever pass through the tunnel once it's up and running, the project does seem to be creating a delay in mass transit improvement on basically the same route. Murfreesboro Pike, or Road as I grew up calling it, the part actually on the surface, above the path of the tunnel and extending many miles beyond it into South Nashville, is currently WeGo's busiest bus route. And so naturally, it was the top priority for building dedicated lanes for bus rapid transit. But it's a state road, and the state's priority along that corridor has become the tunnel. So given all that's going on, the mayor's office is turning instead to Nolensville Road and Gallatin Pike as the first places to design new, faster bus service. In just a few minutes, the story of a University of Tennessee professor who found new writings from Virginia Woolf. That's coming up after the newscast.
Thematic Static on WNXP is the mixtape we make together, a themed set loosely organized by you, the listener, handpicking songs according to a theme. Airing first Thursdays at 9 a.m. and again Saturdays at 9 a.m., Thematic Static plucks your requests from the socials at WNXP Nashville and by voice memo at 615-320-9100. Thematic Static, the mixtape we make together, supported by United Record Pressing, only on WNXP.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. Thousands of Tennesseans should be getting some food aid starting this week, but things aren't exactly back to normal for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. The Department of Human Services announced yesterday it was starting to reload EBT cards. Any beneficiaries who would usually get aid between the 1st and 12th should start seeing money in their accounts. Everyone else will see partial payments on their usual dates. Again, that's partial. People are getting up to 65% of their normal amount, but most folks will be getting less. Signe Anderson, a nutrition policy expert at the Tennessee Justice Center, explained on our daily show, This is Nashville.
You get 65% if you receive the maximum benefit, but most families don't receive the maximum benefit. Many receive somewhere in the middle. There's a bit of a complicated formula. We are hearing from families that they could get as little as just $12 in partial benefits.
These partial payments are temporary. Federal law says people have to get their full benefits eventually, but it's unclear when that will happen. Early voting in Tennessee's special congressional election kicked off yesterday. District 7 incorporates parts of Davidson and Williamson counties, along with 11 rural counties to the west. WPLN Power and Equity reporter Miriam has the latest from the polls.
Turnout was high at the Bordeaux Library, where affordability was top of mind for Nashville voters, along with
safety, money, jobs,
healthcare.
At the moment, getting people fed.
Housing.
Inflation is outrageous,
That was Abraham Garcia Ortega, Joe, and Jasmine Patterson. All three cast their vote for Democratic candidate and state representative Afton Bain. Bain has focused on affordability issues, which has net Democrats wins in other special elections this month. Her opponent, former Tennessee Commissioner Matt Van Epps, has shifted his campaign to focus more on affordability.
Whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or independent, affordability is the issue, and you need to speak to it.
That's John Geer, professor of political science at Vanderbilt University and co-director of the Vanderbilt poll.
What it means is that he realizes he can't run just a Trump campaign. I'm Trump's candidate, because that might not be enough to carry this race. But there's just so many unknowns that it's hard to be sure.
One of those unknowns is the candidates themselves. Geer says neither of them have great name recognition. Not a lot of voters who cast a ballot for Bain knew her name or her gender. But voter Garcia Ortega says he remembers her activism before she was a lawmaker.
I remember the day when she got arrested in Capitol Hill because of protesting for her rights. She's going to do an amazing job for us.
Of course, voters at Nashville precincts like this one lean Democratic. The other 12 counties, which lean Republican, will also determine whether the seat stays red or flips blue. Mariana Baca-Yao, WPLN News.
Nashville teens are making sure their voices are heard in politics, even though most aren't old enough to vote. WPLN's Camelia Burris spoke to several about how they're getting involved.
Rise Home is a nonprofit that offers fellowships to high schoolers interested in civic engagement. They host events to educate teens about topics like voter registration and reproductive rights.
Voting is such an important topic for young people because we are the past, the present, and the future, and we are going to help make our community a better place, a safer place.
That's Gabby Vo, a 16-year-old junior at Hume Fogg High School. Rise Home recently partnered with Planned Parenthood and the League of Women Voters to mobilize teens to advocate for themselves. About 30 kids came to the event, which included mock ballot stations and voter registration tables. Jerissa Bowers, one of the nonprofit's organizers, says that it's never too early to learn how voting works.
I have been to voting ballots around election time when I was a kid, with my mom, but really I'm just standing there. I'm not looking at the process of how it works.
Aside from voting, they say kids can also call their lawmakers, go to city council meetings and the Capitol, join political interest groups, and canvass for their favorite candidates. Camelia Burris, WPLN News.
The next man slated for execution in Tennessee is asking Governor Bill Lee for clemency. Harold Wayne Nichols is set to die on December 11th and is asking for life imprisonment instead. Since Lee took office in 2019, the state has carried out 6 executions, and the governor has not used his power to commute a death sentence. Nichols' legal team argues he's an unusual case. He confessed early and took responsibility for a Chattanooga college student's 1988 murder and a series of rapes. They say he's since become a model inmate and still treasures a Bible given to him by the mother of the woman he killed decades ago. Earlier this week, Nichols declined to choose between the electric chair and lethal injection. His legal team says there's not enough information on the state's protocols for him to make an informed decision. The longtime mayor of Martin, Tennessee, has been indicted by a grand jury on charges of official misconduct and theft. Hannah Saad with member station WKMS reports some of the charges against Mayor Randy Brundage involve his daughter, who the state comptroller's office says only worked around a quarter of the hours she was paid for while she was a full-time custodian for the city's police department.
Over a 6-year span, investigators say Natalie Brundage was paid nearly $175,000 in unearned wages and benefits. She didn't report her own hours. Instead, Human Resources relied on the word of her father, the mayor, to tell them if she took time off.
The daughter was also charged with theft and official misconduct. Weekly County's economic development head Brad Thompson also faces charges over how $250,000 were appropriated. The new interim superintendent at Knox County's embattled Richard L. Bean Juvenile Service Center has resigned after serving in the role for less than 6 months. Brian Bivens, a retired assistant chief at Knox County Sheriff's Office, was appointed to the role in July by Mayor Glenn Jacobs after the previous superintendent, Richard L. Bean, was forced out over a series of scandals. Bivens told Knox News that he could not remain at the Bean Center and that he's unable to fix the problems necessary to make it safe or secure. He said the county has not made good on its commitment to the children housed there. The Bean Center has a documented history of problems. A 2023 investigation by WPLN and ProPublica found the facility was using solitary confinement as punishment in violation of state law. Earlier this year, the facility's nurse was fired in retaliation for claims that the facility was mishandling medication management for the kids and had failed to transfer a child in need of medical attention to the hospital. Bivens' resignation comes as the county commission is slated to vote on an ordinance next week to extend the interim position for an additional 6 months before transferring control of the center to the county sheriff's office. Commissioner Larson J., chair of the detention center's board, told WUOT News Bivens' resignation was due to, quote, personal reasons, and expressed gratitude for his service. The board will meet on Thursday to discuss future plans at the center. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. Readers, rejoice! Virginia Woolf, famed early 20th century novelist who penned works such as Room of One's Own and Mrs. Dalloway, has released a new book more than 80 years after her death. WUOT's Pierce Gentry reports.
Over 100 years after they were first written, 3 interwoven short stories by Virginia Woolf that had previously gone mostly unnoticed have been edited and published by Urmila Seshagiri, a professor of English at the University of Tennessee. The stories, collectively published under the title The Life of Violet, are a fictionalized biography written by Woolf about the life of one of her closest friends, Violet Dickinson, 8 years before her first published novel. Here's Seshagiri.
We see the origin of so much that we know so well from 2 decades later. We can really mark a starting point that we weren't able to see as clearly before.
A rough draft of these writings, under the working title Friendships Gallery, has long been held at the New York Public Library. For decades, they were dismissed as crude.
So it seemed like something she just wrote very quickly and sent to her friend, and that was the end of it.
Seshagiri stumbled upon this new edition almost entirely by accident. While looking for a different document, she reached out to a private collection in southern England, Longleat House, in 2018.
And I wrote to them and I said, do you have this document by Violet Dickinson? And they said, yes, we do, and we assume you're also interested in Friendships Gallery by Virginia Woolf. And I said, well, I'm assuming you are talking about a copy of the Friendships Gallery in the New York Public Library. And they said, no, we have a Friendships Gallery by Virginia Woolf, and it's an original piece of work by her.
Intrigued, Seshagiri began making plans to visit England and inspect the writings herself. These were interrupted by the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, however. It wasn't until 2022 that she finally made the trip, and she didn't regret it.
And when I reached the last page of the last story, then I knew, yes, I have found something whose existence is unknown to readers of Woolf, to Woolf scholars, and this matters, and I want people to read these stories.
The pages at Longleat House were heavily revised and professionally typed, with handwritten notes left by Woolf in the margins. The narratives were clearer and more coherent.
The way that they reshape our understanding of Woolf's career is pretty tectonic. I mean, I think it's pretty massive.
That's Anne Fernald, a professor of English at Fordham University in New York City. She was the editor of the Oxford Handbook of Virginia Woolf in 2021.
It's not just that Woolf was writing fiction in 1907. It's that she revised it, she had it professionally typed, she sent it to her friend. She was taking herself seriously much earlier than we've thought.
The 3 stories of the collection each deal in themes that Woolf would explore in her later works. They examine the unique life of Violet Dickinson and what it means to be an aristocratic woman living alone in Victorian England. One passage in the second story plants the seeds for what would become one of Woolf's most famous works.
She's talking to a friend and she says, "Do you know, it seems to me, well, don't you think, Violet, it would be very nice to have a cottage of one's own?" And there you have a room of one's own right there in 1907.
And the stories are funny. Seshagiri says readers of Woolf's later work, known for its darker, depressive themes, might be surprised to find this one imaginative, lighthearted, and a bit absurd.
There are no villains. There are no punishments. It's just a wonderful playground for imagining what might happen if women were allowed to do whatever they wanted to do.
The Life of Violet, written in 1907 by Virginia Woolf and edited today by Urmila Seshagiri, is available now. I'm Pierce Gentry, WUOT News.
Thanks for listening to the Nash Villager podcast. We take this look at news every weekday. If you like it, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite podcasting app and tell a friend or give us a mention on your socials. It really helps get the word out. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can become a member at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.